there'll be fines for house parties, but when you look at the spread associated, for instance, with GAA activity, and you look at the fact that now somebody can't go hill walking or play a game of golf or play a game of singles tennis, which would seem to carry relatively low risk, is there an inconsistency here that's going to make it hard to keep the rules?
Well, I'll just start by saying that I think the fines and the debate around them has been cover for government failure on many, many levels in dealing with this virus. And actually, the evidence is there that fines don't work. And for me, it sends out the completely wrong message to society that somehow it's about personal behaviour, not about how government are responding. And I'd like to see us debate much more thoroughly and have forensic examination of what is going wrong in terms of the delivery of solutions or attempts to crush the virus. There's so much stuff, and we'll see this later on, that we can discuss around nursing homes, around testing and tracing, around the lack of staff. There's 2 strikes looming now in the key areas where we need to keep workers on board, the public health doctors and the laboratory scientists, for very, very good reasons. So there's a huge amount wrong with what the government are doing, but they're deflecting from it by bringing in this legislation. And actually, fines don't work. And as I said in the Dáil, there is a certain class bias to this, because in the leafy suburbs, the better off areas, you won't really notice if there's a dinner party taking place because of the level of space and privacy people have. But in the poorer areas where people are confined together in greater numbers, a lot of overcrowding in public housing, for example, that's where the attention will be focused on.
All right.
And I think that is the wrong thing to do.
Michael Fitzmaurice, kinds of workers we need to get us through the pandemic. How urgent is the need for action during this lockdown to make sure we don't have to go back into one again?
Well, unfortunately, these kind of problems that should have been foreseen, because these are not new problems, particularly with the public health doctors and the laboratory scientists, they should have been foreseen. We should have dealt with them when we were in the last lockdown. Instead, we rushed to open up the economy, to allow more travel. 7,000 people a day come into this country without being properly checked or quarantined, or any of the measures that would help us to crush the virus. So the things that should have been dealt with in the earlier period haven't been, and now they're coming together in a perfect storm. And the issues are around pay and conditions. And the same is true for nurses. When the private nursing home sector say that the HSE are poaching their workers, it's not a question of poaching, it's a question of pay and conditions. And if we treat workers properly, pay them properly, give them proper contracts. We saw the 0-hour contract that was given to recruit tracers being exposed in the Dáil. It's just mad. We need to treat our workers properly, and particularly our public health workers and those who we want to engage in the contact tracing and the testing. So we do have a real problem here, and it is absolutely urgent that the government find a path to creating the proper levels of public health teams that we need to not be running away from the virus, but chasing it down, hunting it, and being able to allocate exactly where there are outbreaks and to crush them. And we're not in that position, we're miles away from it.
It's not just the opposition saying that, Minister, it's also the nurses. They want more supports, they want dedicated teams, and there's talk now of the antigen testing being brought into the schools when they reopen after midterm. How critical is all of that?
Well, I'm very, very concerned about what's going on in schools, and we keep hearing that there's a very low level of infection in schools, and yet we have over 800 vulnerable teachers who are having to go into work. We also have more who are related to vulnerable people at home. And we started out with a poor system because we have a very high class size level, one of the highest in Europe. And we haven't managed to resource the schools properly, never mind giving them toxic hand sanitizer. We haven't resourced them properly. We haven't allowed for enough spacing. We haven't employed enough teachers, special needs assistants. And we also find that people like school secretaries, who are frontline workers, who do all the dealing with parents, with delivery men, with teachers, with children and with their problems, they're also being ignored and haven't been properly tested. And they also have issues to do with pay equality. Pay equality is still a huge issue for women in this country. And the 2 strikes I mentioned earlier among laboratory scientists and public health doctors happen to be the vast majority of them are women. And there are loads of issues around their pay that haven't been sorted. But there's the schools issue from a health and safety point of view is not satisfactory. And we're very, very concerned about it, because we do work with teachers, with principals and with others who are at the front line, and they're expressing deep worry. And I live with a school teacher, and I can see the distress and the worry that they carry around with them every day. They come home exhausted, dreading the next day, because it is very difficult in schools at the moment, and that's not being acknowledged.
And going back to the Minister on that, and then I'll come to you, Mike, future legislation that will give people access to their own personal records in this archive. The people affected, and I think generally in this country, we have no faith in that process, no faith whatsoever. Look, the government have made a complete bags of this, and they ought to be hugely embarrassed. Not alone do they just, ram through legislation on the basis of telling us repeatedly, and the Taoiseach said it repeatedly, that these files would be destroyed. Nowhere in legislation does it say that the information or the files or whatever data they have would be destroyed if we didn't pass this legislation before Friday. That is just a sword of Damocles held over our head to force through a situation that they wanted to pass. But there are other worries other than just the personal information of the women, which is hugely, hugely important. I asked the Minister what else is going in to be sealed for 30 years. And he said there's records of institutions, there's departmental records, and there's other stuff. And I said, and do you know what that other stuff is? And he said, no. So we're sealing away for 30 years data, information that we don't actually know the full story on. Now, the Commission will publish its report at next Friday, but they have extended the Commission, interestingly enough. They couldn't extend it beyond the 30th of October to allow us to consider the legislation or to amend it better, but they've extended it till February to allow victims and survivors to redact their information. So they have been completely contradictory. They've been lying to us. They've been pressurising us on the basis of false information that the data, that all the files will be destroyed. It's outrageous. And I'm calling on the President not to sign this legislation. Please, Michael D, don't sign it, and you'll be the best hero that the women of Ireland ever had. Do you endorse that call?